Good morning. Welcome to the gathering. I'm glad you guys are here. Let me reiterate what Sam said. This card right here that you got on your way in, this is the most important piece of paper you have ever held in your entire life. Or something like that, right? No, we love it when you give us your prayer request and we can pray for you, and I'd love it if all of you filled this out. But if you are here for the first or second time today, man, I would love to know about that. Check one of those boxes on the card, and we have a special gift that we would like to send to you this week. You can tear your card off just like that. So you got these sermon notes, so if the preacher says anything good, you can write it down. If he doesn't say anything good, you can draw a picture, all right? And then you take the small part, drop it in one of the offering boxes on your way out, and we would greatly appreciate that. I want to tell you about Starting Point, because our next Starting Point is in just a few weeks on May 18th. And Starting Point is this class that we have for anybody who wants to know a little bit more about the gathering. So if you're new here, or if you're newer, or you've never been to Starting Point, or if you're just wondering, how do I get more connected at this place, Starting Point is the place to start. So May 18th, 9:30 a.m. in the youth room. That's where it will be, and I hope you guys can make it for that if it applies to you. This morning, I am going to ruffle your feathers. And if you don't have feathers, then I guess I'm just going to upset you a little bit. I don't know how that works, but I want to say something right off the bat that may feel a little bit odd to some of you. You may want to push back on it, and that's okay. That's why we're here. But here we go. Jesus never said that we should love ourselves. All right, let me say it a different way. Jesus never commanded us to love ourselves. He never told us to love ourselves. And I know when we hear that, a few of us are like, I don't know, because part of our culture is that self-love is really important. But when you think about what the Bible teaches and what Jesus taught, so the Bible teaches us that self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. But self-esteem actually is not. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Maslow, at the very top of the pyramid, put self-actualization. But on Jesus' pyramid of priorities, Jesus puts at the very top self-sacrifice. See, there's a phrase that we hear pretty commonly in our day and age. It is something like, "You are enough." You've probably heard that. You are enough. You've seen a sign with it. You are enough. And I just want you to think for a minute if that's actually true. On your own, are you actually enough? Now, don't misunderstand me. You are valuable. You are created in the image of God. And He loves you more than you could ever love yourself. And in fact, God loves you so much, you are of so much worth to Him, that He sent His one and only Son to die in your place. And Jesus willingly came to die in your place, to rise again so you could have eternal life and spend eternity with God. That's how much He loves you. You are incredibly valuable to Him. You are full of worth because you're made in His image. But does that mean that you are enough? You see, the teaching of the Bible is actually that you are not. That's the whole reason Jesus had to come and die. That's the whole reason we have the death, the burial, the resurrection, the ascension, is because Jesus had to do something for us that we could not do for ourselves, so that He could gain for us something we could not earn for ourselves. On our own, we're actually not enough. And so it really doesn't matter who says it. If Oprah says it, if Lady Gaga says it, it doesn't matter. If they say you're not enough, that's actually not true. In fact, I would say this. When it comes to something being objectively true or not, there is as much truth in the saying you are enough as there is in any of Stuart Smalley's affirmations. Now, some of you have no idea who Stuart Smalley is. But Stuart Smalley was actually a Saturday Night Live character a long time ago that he had really low self-esteem. And so every morning he would get up and he would look in the mirror and he would say, "I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me." Now, we laughed at it back then because we realized that just speaking these things doesn't necessarily make them true. Now, it is true that our words have power. And when we remind ourselves of truth, that's helpful for us. But Just simply saying I am enough does not make it so. See, here's the reality. I would suggest to you this morning that we are, and I mean we collectively, mostly the Western world, but we collectively as humans, we are the most self-centered people that have ever lived on the face of the planet. And I think part of that is because we do love to do affirmations and look in the mirror and say, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. I think part of it is because we have elevated the wrong psychology over right theology, right? Saying, I am enough instead of Jesus is enough. But I also think there's this thing that's gone on in the last 2 decades where we begin to find our self-worth and our self-esteem and our value in our screens. Right? I scroll, and what I'm looking for is I'm looking for that dopamine hit that I get when somebody likes me. Right? They hit like, they hit share, I get a new friend, I get a new follower, I get that little red notification button, and it makes me feel good because my brain tells me, hey, that's a good thing. And I begin to say, I'm valuable as long as people like me. I'm valuable as long as people follow me. But you can see how this could go the wrong way really, really quickly, and in fact it has. 3 years ago, the CDC said that loneliness and lack of social connection, think about that, loneliness and lack of social connection in the most connected age humanity's ever known. But loneliness and self-connection are associated with increased risks of depression, anxiety, and even premature death. We are seeing that all the time. Increased risks of depression, anxiety, and premature death. Because even though we have lots of connections, we're not connected at all. And even though we find our self-worth in likes and shares, we actually don't feel valuable at all. In fact, 2 years ago, the Surgeon General declared that loneliness and isolation are now a public health epidemic. Imagine that. In a world where you can connect with anyone, anywhere, at any time, loneliness is an epidemic. Isolation is an epidemic. Is it possible that prioritizing ourselves, focusing on our own needs, our own desires, paying attention only to ourselves instead of to others, actually is not a good idea? But I have a good idea for us today. And here it is. Life is better when you take your focus off yourself and put it onto others. And guess what? This isn't actually my idea. This is Jesus' idea. In Mark chapter 12, someone came to him and said, Jesus, what's the most important commandment? Like, what is the one thing that I really need to know? And this is his answer. The most important is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. Heart, soul, mind, and strength. This is what I love, what I desire, what I think about, or what my attitude is, and what I do. And Jesus says the most important thing you need to know is that God has to have priority in what you love. God has to have priority in what you desire, and what you think about, and what you do. And it's not just that I give God priority over these things, it's that I give God priority in these things. In other words, it's God who determines what I should love. It's God who determines what I should desire. It's God who determines how I should think and what I should think about. It's God who determines what I should do, the choices I should make. And the amazing reality is that when I give God priority in these things, I begin to look and be more like Him. And I actually begin to love the things that God loves, and I love the people that God loves. And I begin to desire what God desires, and I desire what God desires for me. And I begin to think the thoughts of God, and I begin to think like God, and my attitude is a reflection of Him, and my actions are a reflection of who He is and what He wants me to do. And in all of this, what ends up happening is my life actually gets better. because now I'm living the life he created me to live, because life gets better when I take my focus off myself and prioritize him. But Jesus didn't stop there. He kept going. He says in the next verse, the second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And there is no other commandment greater than these. Now here is where someone might say, David, right here, doesn't Jesus command us to love ourselves? Now what he says, right? He says, look, love your neighbor as you love yourself. You can't love your neighbor until you love yourself. And I've had this conversation with lots of people who said, see, you can't love somebody else until you can love yourself. But that's not really what Jesus is saying, is it? I mean, if you break the sentence down, the command here is to love your neighbor, right? The measurement of your love is your love for yourself. And so what Jesus is doing is he's commanding love for others, and he's observing that we already love ourselves, because we do. Now, sometimes our self-love, it gets a little bit messed up, and it takes us off the rails. But what Jesus is saying here is you love yourself already, and your love for others needs to be at that level. Now, he doesn't say you have to love others more than yourself. He doesn't say that here. But he absolutely says you cannot love others less than yourself. Now, someone in the crowd said to Jesus, hey, Jesus, you say love our neighbor as ourselves, so who is that? Who is my actual neighbor? And if you read the same account in Luke, Jesus goes into the parable of the Good Samaritan here. And he uses that parable to explain who our neighbor is. And his point is, your neighbor is anyone you come into contact with. Anyone who sits in your circle of influence. That's your neighbor. So your neighbor is anybody you like and anybody you don't like. It's the people who are like you, and it's the people who are not like you. Anyone with whom you come into contact, that's your neighbor, and Jesus says, love them as you love yourself. And then he goes on, and he says, look, there are no commandments greater than these two. And in the Jewish Torah, there were 613 commands. And so Jesus is saying, take all those 613, these two are more important. Jesus is clarifying and simplifying for us. In another one of the Gospels, he actually says that these two encompass all 613. If you truly love God, if you truly love others, you'll be able to keep all 613. But what Jesus is also showing us is God's heart behind the commandments. Because God doesn't give these commandments just to control us. He doesn't give these commandments because he hates us, because he doesn't want us to have any fun. In fact, it's the exact opposite. God gives us these commandments because he wants us to have a better life. It's probably about 20 years ago or so. We lived in Michigan, and there was a camp up in northern Michigan where I used to speak. And so every so often we'd go up there, and one year it was winter, and so we were going to go up there for snow camp. And I was the speaker, so Friday afternoon, got the family together, and we got on the road. Now, it had been snowing all day. It was still snowing, and it was like really hard snow, hard to see. There were probably already a couple of feet of snow on the ground, and so the going was really slow. And eventually, we realized we were not going to make it to camp before dinner. So we're going to have to find something on the way. And if you've ever been to northern Michigan, you know that there's not a lot of places to stop. So if you find something, you better stop. So eventually we found a truck stop, and we said, now, it wasn't like a Pilot or a Love or one of these fancy truck stops like that. This was like called the M46 Truck Stop and Diner. And it was exactly what you think it was. A little bit run down, really shady characters, and grease everywhere. But they had chicken nuggets for the kids, and so we were good to go. So we sat down and we got our menus, and you know, it's those menus that they've got the pictures of all the food and they're laminated, but you got to wipe it off with a napkin so it doesn't slip out of your hands. So I'm looking at the menu, and I'm like, oh, that looks good, because they got the picture. And it was this really good-looking picture of country fried chicken. It was like golden brown, and it had gravy and gravy and gravy. It was like this white, thick gravy. It looked like cake icing. And I was like, that is what I'm going to order. And so our waiter came out, and he's like, what do you want? The kids got their nuggets. I'm like, I want the I want the country fried chicken. And some of you already know what's going to happen next because you've heard stories like this before. And you know that the next thing is that Marianne is going to say to me, is that a good idea? Spoiler, it was not a good idea. I had a very restless night that night. And unfortunately, so did Marianne. And I'm not going to go into great detail, and I want to make this as delicate as I can, but we'll just say that the country fried chicken tasted better the first time than it did the second. After that, Marianne made some new commandments for our family. She said, "Thou shalt not eat at truck stop diners anymore. Thou shalt not eat chicken fried or country fried chicken anymore. And thou shalt really be careful with gravy." Now, did she make these commandments because she hates me? Because she doesn't want me to have any fun? Because she wants to control me? No. She made these commandments because she loves me, because she wants what's best for me, and because she wants me to have a better life. And you know what? She was right. I don't eat at truck stop diners anymore. I don't eat country fried chicken anymore. And I'm really careful with gravy. And my life is better for it. This is why God gives us commandments. Not because he's mad at us, not because he hates us, not because he's trying to control us and take away all of our fun, but because he loves us, because he wants what's best for us, and he wants us to experience a better life, and so he gives us these commandments. Now, in Mark, Jesus is giving us 2 commandments, but those 2 commandments are rooted in the 613 and really rooted in the 10 commandments. So over this year, we've been going through the Old Testament. And right before Easter, we made it as far as the Israelites being freed from Egypt. And as they come out of Egypt, now God is creating a new nation. But I want you to see how this fits the context of the whole Old Testament. Remember, the Old Testament is this one story about how God's plan works out. It begins with Eve, when Adam and Eve sin, and God makes a promise to Eve, and he says, one of your descendants is going to undo everything that you've done. One of your descendants will crush the head of the serpent. And so now for the rest of the Old Testament, what we're doing is we're watching the descendants of Eve to see which of these descendants will be the promised one, which will be the fulfillment of God's plan. Now, it begins with Eve, and it's this big, wide group. It's all of humanity, because she's the mother of all of humanity. But then later in Genesis, it becomes Abraham and his descendants. And so now it's been narrowed down to just this one family. But Abraham has different sons. He has Isaac and he has Ishmael. And God says it's Isaac. That's the son of the promise. And Isaac has 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. And it's Jacob that's the son of the promise. And then Jacob has a whole bunch of sons that become the 12 tribes of Israel. And so now we understand that the promise will be fulfilled through the descendants of Jacob, through the 12 tribes of Israel. And now God is creating this new nation. They've been enslaved for 400 years. They don't know how to live. They don't know how to function. They've never been on their own, and so he lays down the law for them. It's kind of like a constitution for them. He gives them the 10 commandments. Now, understand this. God did not rescue Israel from Egypt because they obeyed the commandments. They didn't even have the commandments yet. You see, God rescued Israel from Egypt because of his grace and mercy. It had nothing to do with what they did. He rescued them because of his grace and mercy. And then, once he rescued them, he said to them, now this is how I want you to live. And the same is true with us. God does not rescue us or save us because we obey him. In fact, there is nothing that we can do to earn salvation from him. He doesn't save us because we're so good. In fact, it's the exact opposite. He saves us in spite of ourselves. Because of his grace and mercy, he saves us. And then once he saves us, he says to us, this is how I want you to live. So this morning, we're going to explore the 10 commandments. We're going to compare them to the 2 commandments that Jesus gave. And we're going to try to understand what that means for us and how it is that these commandments can lead us to a better life. I want to show you this thing that I noticed this week as I was studying the 10 commandments, that the first command teaches that we are to prioritize God, right? You shall have no other gods before me. The final command teaches us that we ought to be grateful for what we have. Don't covet. And the middle command, number 5, shows that we ought to focus on our families. Right? Children, honor your parents. And as I thought about this, I thought this is kind of cool because you have bookends and then you have the middle. And this is really a philosophy of life that will work. If you prioritize God with your life, if you practice gratitude for what you have, and if you focus on family, you'll find yourself living the life God created you to live. Prioritizing God means putting Him first. Right? Being grateful, that helps you to have the right attitude as you go through life. And it's through the family that God's plan is that He preserves society. Now, that looks different for all of us, doesn't it? Depending on where you're at in life, focusing on family looks a little bit different. For some of you, you're getting ready to have a family. For some of you, you've got kids, and you've got to really focus on bringing them up to be like Jesus. Some of you are a stage of life like me. It's like, our kids are gone, we're done taking care of them, now we've got to take care of our parents. Some of you are grandparents, and you're focusing means you're investing in the future generations. For some of you, you may not have much of a big family, but you can be a father figure to someone or a mother figure to someone. There's ways for all of us to focus on family. This is one of the reasons we make a big deal about families here at the Gathering. It's one of the reasons we do child dedication every Mother's Day. Because it's a chance for us as a church to commit and to recommit that we want to be a place where every child learns to know Jesus, love Jesus, and follow Jesus for their whole life. So on Mother's Day, we're going to have this whole stage will be full of young families. They have their kids. They want to dedicate their kids. And the parents are saying, we are committed to bring our children up to know, love, and follow Jesus. And we as a church say, and we are committed to join you in that endeavor, to pray with you, to support you, to encourage you, to come alongside of you. And it's a great opportunity for us to remember that no matter where you're at in life, you can make investment in families. By the way, if you're a parent and you haven't dedicated your kids and you want to do it this year, you should sign up right away. Right? You've only got a couple of weeks, so you can sign up on the Church Center app or write us a note on the connection card. We'll make sure you get set up. All right, let's dive into the Ten Commandments, shall we? Exodus chapter 20. It says, "And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." God begins by talking about who He is, because all of God's commands are rooted in God's character. And so He begins by saying, remember who I am. I am your Savior. I am your Redeemer. I am your provider. I am your sustainer. I am your teacher. And because this is who I am, this is who I want you to be. And then He dives into the Ten Commandments. The first 4 are, you shall have no gods before me, don't make any idols, respect my name, keep the Sabbath. All of these are focused on our relationship with God. In fact, if we compare them to Jesus' 2 commandments, they kind of mirror the first one, right? Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And really what this shows us is that the heart of the first 4 commandments is that life is better when you prioritize God above all. Sometimes we struggle with priorities. Do you struggle? I know I do sometimes. What do I do first? What do I do most? Where do I put my energy? Sometimes we struggle with priorities. And it's the same with God. Sometimes we struggle to prioritize God in our hearts, our mind, our souls, and our strength. There's a guy named Stephen Covey, and some of you know that name. He was a leadership guy, a productivity guy, and he would often use an illustration to teach about priorities. He would have a big glass bowl, and he would have a whole bunch of large rocks and a whole bunch of small rocks. And he'd pour all the small rocks in and then point out, with all the small rocks in here, you don't have room to get all the big rocks in. And this is how life is sometimes, right? You got all these small things going on that are taking your attention, that are distracting you, and when you only pay attention to the small things, you don't have time for the big things. But then he'd dump the rocks out, and he'd put the big rocks in first, and so that if you put the big rocks in first, then you pour the small ones in, you actually can find space for all of them. And his point was, you have to focus first on what's most important. In your life, prioritize the big things, and then the little things will fall into place. That's what our priority with God ought to be. You see, God has priorities for you. God has expectations of you. He wants you to serve Him and follow Him and obey Him. But sometimes we don't prioritize God's expectations because we're too busy prioritizing our own expectations. To prioritize God simply means that I fit my life around His expectations instead of trying to fit His expectations into my life. Did you ever do that? Like, I know what I want for my life. I know who I want to be, where I want to go, what I want to do. And as long as God's expectations fit my agenda, then we're good. But if God's expectations for me don't fit my agenda, then maybe we're not so good. Imagine if when my kids were young, Liam came home from school one day and said, "Hey, Dad, I'm really struggling with math today. Do you think you could help me out with my math homework?" I say, "Oh, man, Liam, absolutely. I mean, I love you. You're my son. You are my top priority. I will help you with your math as soon as the Tigers game is over." A little bit later, he says, "Hey, Dad, can you help me with my math now?" And I said, "Liam, absolutely. I love you. You're my son. You're my top priority. I will help you with your math as soon as I finish making these new bacon-wrapped Swiss cake rolls." And then later, "Dad, will you help me?" "Yeah, you're my son. I love you. You're my first priority. I will help you as soon as I finish reading this book." Now, at some point, Liam starts saying to himself, "I'm not sure that I am my dad's first priority." Because it seems like there's a lot of things that he's prioritizing over me. And how often do we say to God, "God, yes, I will obey you, I will serve you, I will follow you, I will do what I know you want me to do. I will give up what I know you want me to give up as soon as I get this, as soon as I finish that, as soon as I accomplish this, as soon as this comes true, as soon as you do this for me." And as long as I'm trying to fit God's expectations into my life, I can never experience life the way He created me to live it. If I want to experience the best life, the life that God created me to live, I must learn to prioritize Him above and in every aspect of my life. How do I prioritize God in my family? How do I prioritize God at work? How do I prioritize God in my friendships? How do I prioritize God in my finances? How do I prioritize God in my neighborhood, in my hobbies? Go on down the list. How do I prioritize God in my life? Because when I do, I experience the life that He created me to live. That's the first four. The second 6 commands are: honor your parents, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, don't covet. And at first glance, we look at these and we say, yeah, this makes sense, right? We all agree on these, actually. Honor your parents, yeah, that's a good thing. You shouldn't do any of those. And we can often look at this and say, well, it's like a checklist, right? I just have to go down the list and I have to check off all these items. And as long as I'm checking off all these items, I'm good. But understand this. When we look at these commandments and align them with Jesus' commands, love your neighbor as yourself, what we realize is that these 6 are not a checklist, they're a check on our heart. Am I loving my neighbor as I love myself? You see, often we live life looking in the mirror instead of looking out the window. I mean, I like mirrors. Most people like mirrors. If you ever people watch in a place where there's mirrors, what you'll see is that most people, when they walk by a mirror, what do? They look in the mirror. Who's that handsome devil? Right? We just like to look at ourselves in a mirror because that's just ingrained in us. One of my favorite places to watch people have a relationship with a mirror is the gym. Right? Every gym has like a wall of mirrors. Now, when I'm at the gym, I don't do weights. I'm not a weight guy. I don't like that. I'm just all cardio, so put me on a treadmill, put me on a stair machine. I'm happy there. But it's kind of fun to watch the guys who lift the weights because they have a really unique relationship with the mirror. And I know some of you aren't laughing right now because you're the ones I'm talking about, and I'm sorry for that. But they get up right to the neighbor. They get like, what is this, a dumbbell thing? What is this, is a bicep curl? Is that what this is? And they're going to look in the mirror to check their form. Right? Like, ooh, feel the burn. Hey, that guy's hot. Right? But here's the thing. We like to laugh at this, but we all do this. We love to go through life looking at ourselves, focusing on ourselves, living in the mirror. Here's how you know you're doing it. When you compare yourself to others, you're living in the mirror. When we compare ourselves to others, one of two things happens. Either we feel better about ourselves or we feel worse about ourselves. But either way, it's about ourselves. Right? Sometimes I'll compare myself to other people so I can be like, man, I'm glad I'm not like that person. Whew, they're terrible. I feel so good about myself. And other times it's, man, I wish I could be more like that person. I feel really bad about myself. But either way, it's all about me. When I'm comparing myself to others, I'm looking in the mirror. When I complain, I'm looking in the mirror. Why do I complain? I don't like what's happening to me. I don't like what's happening around me. I don't like the situation I find myself in. I don't like the way other people are treating me. Me. When I complain, I'm living in the mirror. When I criticize, I'm living in the mirror. Why do I criticize? Well, because other people aren't living up to my expectations of them. They should really do better. They should really be better. I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they said that. Right? How terrible of them. When I criticize, I'm living in the mirror. So if I'm comparing, complaining, and criticizing, I'm living in the mirror. And as long as I'm living in the mirror, I'm focused on myself, and that is not a good idea. Here's what God is teaching us in the Ten Commandments. Here's what Jesus is teaching us in the Two Commandments, is that life is better when you focus on others instead of yourself. That's looking out the window. And instead of living in the mirror, I want to live in the window, because the window is where I look outside of myself and I start to notice and I start to pay attention. This is the key. When I pay attention, I am intentionally choosing not to look at myself, but instead to look at others. And loving others as I love myself means paying attention to the opportunities God brings for me to make the lives of others better. Let me say that again. Loving others as I love myself means I pay attention. I'm intentionally looking. I'm noticing the opportunities God brings my way, and He does all the time, to make the lives of others better. A lot of times I miss those opportunities because I'm not looking out the window, because I'm busy looking in the mirror, comparing, complaining, criticizing. But when I begin to notice, I pay attention, I listen, I watch, I discover that all around me there are people that God has brought my way in whose lives I can make an incredible impact if I will choose to love them like I love myself. The world tells you to love yourself. That's not a good idea. In fact, it hasn't worked. The self-esteem movement really began back in the 70s. That's the 1970s. I know, we've reached that point where some of you here were born after the 1900s. And I'm like, yeah, I'm from the 1900s. But the self-esteem movement started in the 1970s. And if you will take the time to look at charts and graphs and wherever else you want to look, and see the numbers on mental health illness and mental health issues, what you will discover is that no matter how you measure it, no matter where you measure it, no matter what statistics you use, since 1970, mental health issues have gone up drastically, off the charts. Do you know why? Because the self-esteem movement actually doesn't work. Because life is actually not better when I focus on myself. Maybe Jesus knew what He was talking about. Maybe God, when He gave us the Ten Commandments, knew what He was talking about. Maybe it actually is as simple as this: love God and love others. Love God by prioritizing Him above all else. Prioritizing Him in what you love and what you desire and what you think about and what you do. And love others by focusing on them, paying attention to them, noticing them, and wondering, how can I make their life better? And so this morning I have a challenge for you. I've got two questions I want you to ask this week. Question number one, how can I prioritize God? How can I put his expectations above my own? How can I make him first in my life? Question number two, how can I focus on others? How can I notice what's going on around me? How can I listen to the people who are near me? How can I pay attention to what God is bringing to me? Maybe for this one, it's as simple as saying, who are 3 or 4 people in my life that I want to really love this week? And then just pay attention. Look for ways in your interactions with those 3 or 4 people to say, how can I help this person experience the love of God in a way that they haven't before? God says that when we prioritize him and when we focus on those around us, our life will be better because that's how he created us to live. And it actually is a good idea to take my focus off myself because life is better when I focus on others instead of me.